So, Lone Rider here, and I wanted to go about down tube shifters, maybe a little more in depth, and there's a reason for that. These generally get a bum rap. People figure they're obviously old-fashioned, but more than that, people just figure they're junk. They're not junk. They're actually very usable. They're, I won't say the simplest shifter ever made. I think the so-called suicide shifter, which was a lever that basically loosened the rear wheel and moved it so you could, because they didn't have spring-loaded derailleurs back then. We're talking early 1900s. I think you could say that was probably the simplest shifting mechanism ever made, but these do come close, and the advantages are in their simplicity. The thing about, put this here, the thing about the down tube shifters is that there's not a lot to them, and because there's not a lot to them, it's very easy to maintain them. It's very easy to use them once you know what you're doing, and there you go. It's just that like anything where there's less to the technological aspect, there has to be more to the human aspect. So the shifters do less of the work mechanically in terms of synchronizing, indexing, etc. You have to do all that, but it's very simple. So basically, they're mounted down here. There's a barrel-shaped body and a lever, usually all one piece. Hole drilled through, pin going through into a mount or into the frame itself, or both. Now, when you move the lever, for example, you pull this back, it pulls more cable around here. Think of it as almost as if it's the barrel of a winch that's turning. So you pull this back, the cable gets pulled up and around. The amount of cable that's pulled is therefore determined by the width of this part. Now, and it does vary between brands. Now, here it's the same thing, and again, pull back, it pulls cable. The difference is, of course, when you pull cable for the front, you're actually moving it to a harder gear, from smaller to larger. When you pull cable for the back, you're actually moving it from a smaller gear to a larger gear, but in the back, that makes it harder, not easier. So you're I guess we could call it upshifting when you pull cable in the front, you're downshifting when you pull cable in the back. And the way this works in terms of getting it right, because a lot of these don't index. These can't be Victory, they don't index at all. Some of them do have indexing, but only on this side. And it can be set to friction or indexing. Basically what you do is you're sitting on a bike, and you do this while you're pedaling, of course, but I don't have a chase vehicle with a camera, so. And you move the shifter until you feel the chain clunk, and then you stop it. Sometimes you got to wiggle it a little more to one side or the other, just very, very slightly, like a hair, so that it's evenly positioned. It's not, pulling on one side of the gear or the other. But you figure out right away how to do that. Now, obviously, this isn't as ideal if you're racing nowadays. Ironically, one of the first objections to indexed shifting, which, like I said, showed up here before it went to drifters, was that the racers thought, well, if you could hear the click of somebody's gears, it would give you an idea. Supposedly. I mean, I've read that in cycling magazines, old articles. I honestly don't know how true that is. Nobody I've talked to ever raised that, even people who were racing back then during the transition from friction to indexing. I'm not even sure, frankly, with the wind. I've ridden in large groups. I've watched bike races. I've never been in one. But, you've got a pack of people coming around a corner really freaking fast. You get a lot of wind noise from the spokes. You get the free wheels or cassettes. In some cases, obviously, in modern times, cassettes ratcheting. The sound of people moving and breathing. You're not going to probably hear the click of a gear. You just think it. I mean, maybe if somebody's like right next to you or something, but I don't know. But that is one criticism. These are more primitive. They don't index on the front, on the left side, and if they do index at all, it's only on this side, and that was almost an afterthought right before these were sort of phased out and everybody went to grifters or down to bar end shifters. And the advantage, of course, of the grifters is they're indexed and they're up here. You don't have to take your hands off the bars. Which brings me to the next thing. People say that these are unsafe because you got to take your hands off the bars. I think a lot of those people are actually thinking of something else, which is levers that were mounted up here. They look very much like this, but they're mounted up here. And you found those on a lot of cheap bikes, from the bike boom years, etc. The problem with the levers that are mounted up here is that you're taking your hands off the bars, yes, but more importantly, you're keeping them high and you're moving them in. That makes you very unstable. Right? Stability is a function of center of gravity and width. And, well, you can test this yourself. Ride your bike with your hands holding the stem here and try and go around a corner. Just make sure you do it while you're wearing your helmet, because you probably will fall if you've never done that before. I can't do it either, and I've been cycling for like 20-something years. What I can do, and what a lot of people sometimes do on regular road bikes if they want to get more aero, is ride with their hands like this when they're going straight on a narrow straight road way off to the side of traffic. We've all done it, especially if we're, like down with the shore, beach, or something with a lot of winds coming off the ocean that you're trying to achieve. It makes you more streamlined in the front, similar to the effect created by time trialers' aero bars, those handlebars where you hold it like this. The thing about those guys is the same thing. I'm sure many of them are excellent athletes. Most of them are probably in better shape than me, obviously. In terms of bike handling skills, that position does not give you a lot of options. It's much less stable. Now, too wide, obviously, is no good either. But generally speaking, you want a certain width. I mean, that's why there's a variety of handlebar width. You want a certain width. You bring your hands in, and it's just going to be less stable. But that's if you're bringing them in at height. If you bring them in, and at least one of them in, and it's low down, you're doing away with one of those factors. You're not as wide anymore, but you're also not way off on your center of gravity. You're reaching to the center, but you're reaching low. And ironically, that works. It works all the time, every time. I've never had a stability problem with this. Never had a problem of, oh my God, I'm taking the hand off the handlebars. No. And hardly anybody else has either. And there's a reason for it. It was designed this way because it works. They could have put these anywhere, right? When there was no standard, no preconceived notion of where down tube shifters went on the down tube. They could have put them up here. They could have mounted them to the sides of the steerer tube. They could have put them up here, as eventually happened on some cheap bikes in the bike boom years of the 70s. They could have done a lot of things with these. They chose to put them here for a reason, right? A lot of the people who designed these things knew what they were doing. And, you're riding and you reach down here, it's a lot more stable than reaching in and up here. Which is why, aside from their kludginess and the fact that they're usually cheap and not very well made, a cyclist like myself who's into older or vintage bikes, when they find an old used bike that they like the frame, that it has those kludgy up shifters up here, they'll change them, either to bar end shifters usually, or usually to down tube shifters. Sometimes they'll convert to grifters, but with the brake lever and the shifter are the same, like Shimano STI or the new Campy and SRAM. But again, if it's an old bike, they'll probably try and keep it traditional, so they'll usually go with these. Now, if it's not made for these, you can have one of two choices. You can braze on the mounts and then repaint that area or the whole bike, or you can get a clamp-on mount, which is usually what people will do on the cheap with an old bike, from like a garage sale or a curbside, dump days find or something. But yeah, reaching in and down is not a problem. It's reaching in and up that's a problem. So there you go. Very safe to use. Very, they are what they are, and I think they have just a real definite cool factor going for them. There's other advantages, of course. If you're wearing big, thick winter gloves or mittens, let's say you were riding in January, these are a lot easier to operate with than, grifters, where you have usually two levers, one to shift up and one to shift down, and thick gloves may hit both at the same time, or just be harder to get a hand on it. Bar con or bar end shifters have the same advantage. in terms of wearing, gloves and things. They're located, because they're located inboard. If you were to crash the bike, imagine what would happen if this hit the ground. I'm not actually going to just drop it because this is one of a kind. This was raised by a friend of mine back in the mid to late 1980s, and it's a custom steel frame that you can't just replace. So I'm not going to throw it on the ground, but laying it on the ground gently, you'll see, if you look there, you'll see that the body of the bike is kept off the ground by the handlebars. Now, it's not guaranteed that the handlebars are going to land like that, but generally speaking, you have something sticking out in the front that acts as sort of a bumper or a protector. The shifters are in here. So they're pretty safe from all kinds of damage and this, that, and the next thing if the bike takes a spill. What isn't so safe? Rifters. I mean, after all, it's landing usually on one or more of your handlebars, which is why I remember when a lot of cyclocross bikes actually had gone to rifters. They just had bar end shifters, even as late as the early 2000s. Because cyclocross, you're riding over uneven terrain, you're going to take a spill down that, etc. You want to, kludge up your shifters. The same advantages to be had by this. So if somebody wants a bike, let's say the commuting bike, touring bike, something where they might be out in all weather, this is something to think about, right? You'd probably be better served by bar end shifters. They accomplish most of the same things. Yes, if you do hit the ground, they're on the outside, but they're mounted back here and trailing. So there's not really a lot of damage there. The bar end shifters do have the advantage of you don't have to take your hands off the handlebars, you just slide them down to here and go. But either way, bar end or shifters like this, these type of simple, pulling cable around the barrel levers, they have a lot of advantages. There's not a lot to break, there's not a lot to go wrong. They're very easy to learn how to use, they're very easy to maintain. There's really nothing to maintain, just keep it clean and maybe oil it a little. And that's it. And they're not unsafe because you have to take your hands off the handlebars and reach down. They would be potentially unsafe if you had to take your hands off the handlebars and reach in again. So that's down tube shifters. And as far as shifting them, how do you use them and feel that clunk of the chain coming into gear? And it's actually pretty simple what you do. You don't just slap them. I mean, you can. And it's certainly if you have this side hooked up to the index, you can certainly do that. Ding, ding, ding like that. What you actually should be doing is holding it. Thumb and forefinger. And you should be holding it like that and solidly enough. I mean, you don't want to yank it off the frame, but solidly enough that you can feel the clunk. This is all connected. There's a wire here under tension. The wire is going right to the shifter. The shifter is moving the chain, and the chain's going to be in contact with the plate of the shifter until it drops off. You're going to feel literally the clunk, and you get used to that. It's kind of, I don't want to say like use the force loop, but it's you just have to be attuned to your bike and what it's doing. And in a lot of ways, I think, by the way, down tube shifters, at least growing up with them, does make you a better rider in terms of skill set, right? In terms of, it teaches you a lot of things. One is when it's safe to shift and not to shift. For example, if you have to take your hands off the handlebars, you're not going to shift while you're leaning into a hard turn, going through a busy intersection, etc. You're going to shift before then or after then. Consequently, you're going to be, it combines more awareness of your bike, more awareness of your surroundings, and their potential effects in terms of, traffic safety, etc. Again, taking a hand off. Also, your gears. You're going to use the more full range of your gears because it may not be safe to take your hand off the bars to shift due to, again, environmental factors. Taking your hand off the bars to shift with the setup is perfectly safe, as a rule, generally speaking, but there are certain times it's not good to do it. Now, with drifters, we might be tempted to think we can shift anytime we want because we don't have to take our hands off the bars. But there are still times when, because of how you're pedaling, what gear combination you're in terms of cross chaining, etc., things that are going on around you, where the gear skipping and losing tension with the terrain that's under you. It might not be a good idea. Right? There are still times when it's not a great idea to shift, both on the road and off. And again, this awareness translates to not just other road riding, even without these. It translates to riding in the woods, mountain biking. Do you shift while you're going over a log, for example? That type of thing. It's good to know. But it's stuff that people wouldn't know if they never grew up with these. It's kind of like, I liken it, for shooters you'll understand this, I liken it to learning to use iron sights before using optics. It's, if you don't learn the basics, then you're not going to be able to take advantage of the more advanced technology as fully. Somebody who grew up using these and then goes to drifters will be, I think, a better rider than somebody who just started with drifters. But these have their own uses in terms of, they're just very simple, very durable. There's not a lot to them, so there's not a lot to go wrong with them. And yes, you have to do a little more, but again, that has its benefit. You're learning more too, and developing skills. And what's wrong with that? So these are the down tube shifters, and I think they're wicked cool. Again, these are Camping Victory. You're probably not going to find these. They're about 40 years old or more, and they're just one example of the many types that are out there. But as a stand-in for down tube shifters in general, I don't think you can go wrong with these. And as a shifter type, I mean, if you want something that's simple, easy to use, it has all the benefits of down tube shifters, and you're not racing at a amateur or even professional level, then you don't need drifters, right? And these are just as good in many ways, and better in some. Right? They're maybe not as suited to competition nowadays. Just like 6-speed isn't as suited to competition as 11-speed. But I got out here perfectly fine with 6. So, Lone Rider out.